So I have this story idea about the near future. So hear me out, right? Girl lives in a camper. Universal basic income has been established, but the market has adjusted to it, so everything costs a lot of money, and you still have to work a lot. But Social Security and like the medical system have not yet been fixed. Right, so girl lives in a camper. Her parents and her friends' parents are all a generation of camper people that went for that van life but didn't really think it through. YouTube pays nothing. YouTube was the thing that their parents had, but now it's like this completely different environment of the internet where it's individual pockets of social media per state, right? So, and they all run on this same basic principle. Instead of keeping 100,000 videos online, like you have a half-life system on each video, so each video eventually deletes itself unless if it gets enough attention to be put on a list of 10,000 videos that were significant in a certain year, or if it continuously gets its half-life replenished by people continually clicking on a thing, right? So, girl lives in a camper, she looks gorgeous, and she needs to make money, but she's not interested in being like an OnlyFans girl, so, because she's worried that could chase her all her life, so she gets a job at a casino, and casinos are a big thing right now. And she's basically an arm candy girl. There's another name for that in Las Vegas, but you basically rent out girls as companions, but not as escorts. Obviously, a lot of those girls win money doing escort work, get a lot more money doing escort work with the rich clients that go to casinos and party all night. But the main girls that are basically the dates for the night only get like $200-300 per trip. Right, so this girl signs up to be an arm candy girl. She gets taught how to behave as an arm candy girl using a VR piece of technology that's super sophisticated because the owner of the casino can afford that. And she's supposed to pay back $60 for every $300 she gets, and she gets a $90 advance for the night. Right, so she has to spend money on her looks. She has to go to a gym, and her gym membership gets her showers. She has to do this and blah, 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 and whatever. And she usually spends some of her money, like, driving to and back from the area. Right? And she has to, like, really work the job. Like, really help the guys with their egos. And it's not a daily thing. She can only go there like maybe twice a week, and she is lying about her age when she gets there. So she puts some money, she owes a guy money for giving her this fake ID to let her be a fake arm candy girl. And the casino owner blatantly knows about this behind the scenes, but he allows it anyway, but he's pretending to be completely clueless and whatever. Right, because the casino owner is actually the guy controlling the guy who gives off fake IDs. Right. So that's your perfect setting for a near future sci-fi story where it's tech that can be developed in the near future. The dudes use these little sticks filled with money, right? Little sticks that are basically just credit cards with an on-off switch. Cash sticks, we call them in the universe, right? So that it's just like a USB-A, only it's like the part where you push the USB-A thing out like a flash drive, but the part where you push the thing out, instead of pushing a thing out, you're just turning it off. You turning it on and off. You pull a switch up, you pull a switch down, and you charge it with a C cable, right? So these guys are rich, but it's their parents' money, and they're not quite as rich as people who just go to see escorts. So they can come up with like $600 or $1,000 if they need to, but it's not the same as the super rich people who can come up with 3,000-4,000 bucks a night for their escorts. So it like the story basically writes itself. This girl goes to a place. One of the guys is like asking her, "Do you do this?" Blah blah blah, and she's like, "No, I'm not like those girls. I'm sorry. I think Name does that, but you're gonna have to ask her." Blah blah blah. And then the next week she's back, right? She's had like a little bit of Spider-Man 2 situational stuff where the world is really really tough and she has taxes to pay because she's using a fake identity, and like she lives in a camper but she still has to pay rent because people got wise to stealth campers. So she asks the guy, hey, she runs into the guy and she's like, hey, how's the night going? And he's like, not very well. I mean, like, your friend's really nice, but like I just cannot afford her. And she's like, really? Why? And he's like, you gotta spend more than $2,000 to get the full service. I'm sorry. Like, I've only got a few hundred in my cash thingy, right? And then she's like, she decides to go for it. And she's like, do you have a room? And he's like, yeah. So you can have a room, you can rent us out for $300 a night. But you don't have enough money to spend on a girl. And he's like, well, I gotta save the cash, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, I got you. Just wondering, what do the girls charge? I haven't actually asked them. And he's like, $300 for a blowjob, this for a hand job, blah, 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 lap dance. And he's like outlining the prices because he's learned them. And she's like, okay, I'll tell you what. And she touches his hand. Just this once. I don't usually do this, but I'll do this, this, and this for $650. And she's like, not gonna fuck him, but she is gonna give him some head and do a striptease and make out with him. Right. So, as soon as she does this, she ends up repeating the same thing with guys, and she's like, I have ground rules. I don't really do that stuff, but if you want, I could give you a hand job or whatever. And blah, blah, blah. So she wins extra money for herself to fix up her life, but she's not full escort. Then the guy comes up a few months later, and he's like, hey, I got a bunch of money. I saved up a bunch of money because this stupid rich kid who can come up with X amount of dollars per week built up some money, and he like put it in a real account, and just now he's got 40 grand, basically, or 14 grand more realistically. After 16 weeks, he's saved up a bunch of money to like actually get to spend a few nights with the girl. And she's like, well, that's nice. And he's like, can I get you to give me a girlfriend experience? And she's like, I don't know. Like, and he's like, no, my dude, like, please, I'll pay you $4,000 per time. Like, he's really obsessed with actually getting to fuck her. And she's like, okay, fine. So he rapidly burns through his money, and she's like, okay, that's fine. Then she's like, thinks about it and decides, hey, you know what? Outside of all this, maybe take me out on a real date. So she ends up becoming his girlfriend by just like realizing that the rich guy is obsessed with her. So you have this story where it's like, here's a really, really poor girl and she's kind of pretty, right? And she goes to a casino and everything's fucked by society and blah, blah, blah. And she basically just inserts herself into this guy's life after like being tempted by the money. So you have this realistic example of a girl like Nora, only unlike Nora, she's not stupid enough to piss off the guy's mom, and the guy's not really partying all the time. He's relatively rich, but not omega rich, right? So and the parents like are not the incompetent types that let him get away with getting tens of thousands of dollars, right? So it is like Pretty Woman, but realistic. Only it's a more realistic take than an alternative type of take than a Nora, where it's not trying to make everything bleak. It just is a character analysis of how girls could pressure themselves into becoming a certain type of girl in the near future based on what's available for them as young women, right? And she's like ends up living with him, but he's like hesitant to have her meet his parents, right? He's a college kid and he's hesitant to have her meet his parents, and she's like, you know, I could try getting a job at that coffee place, because he's bought her some things, some outfits, and everybody kind of looks the same whether they're poor or rich, because clothes are so cheap. And she just gets this job at campus, pouring coffee and pouring drinks and blah, blah, blah. So she's like, now she's stuck because she has actual parents, but her parents' abusive. It has been like, no, her parents were addicted to drugs, because obviously van life would fuck you up after you do it for a couple of decades in mass, because all these types of personalities would just know the same spots to live in. And yeah, and his parents have background check abilities, but because she's trying to work on herself and blah blah blah, there's this whole rich people attitude of, well, you know, she's a van girl, like she could be like on drugs or whatever, but then the mom's the mom's like, oh no, she's trying, like she's working at a coffee shop. Or maybe the dad's like, oh, she's working at a coffee shop and blah, blah, blah. And you have this whole gender dynamic thing where one side has been extra privileged, whereas the other side is just rich and more realistic about the world. Something like that. So you could just have a story where the van girl who did escort stuff marries a guy, marries a rich guy experience, gets actual kids, like covertly builds up some money in some of these cash cards, right? They're designed to be anonymous. So and she's like, we're living with this sort of sense of paranoia about not wanting to lose the money because she came out of nothing, and not wanting to lose the kids in a divorce because he's got all the money and his parents have all the money, and she's worried about that. But at the same time, she hears all about these things with his friends where women just make up stuff about their husbands and get all the money, and she agrees with his friends that, yeah, the system is rigged against dudes. Because of course it is. It was designed and developed by Democrats who didn't really care about having an egalitarian system. They just cared about brownie points and looking great at cocktail parties. So they developed these things and they allowed misandrous to get into the system. And yeah, like all kinds of bullshit. That could be like a legitimately good idea for a movie. Yeah, let's call it Van Girl. and set in the 2040s.